Welcome to the 2022 CSols Summit panel, Demystifying the Data Ecosystem in Practical Approaches to Gaining Value Now. So I'm Phil Callahan, I'm the moderator for this session. Before we start, I want to remind everybody to engage the panelists with questions using the Q&A tab. Everyone can upvote and we'll try to get through as many questions as possible at the end. There's also a chat feature, so you can use that for anything that isn't quite a question for the panelists. And you want to stay engaged on there because let's see, at the end we'll be selecting a random attendee who is active in chat, answering polls and asking questions. So they'll win a prize. So don't be shy. That's why we're all here, to exchange ideas and hopefully learn something. With that, I'll introduce the four speakers. Lisa Richard, the Director of the Data and Analytics Group here at CSols. Brent Kaufman is the Informatics Consultant and Data Engineer. And Vivek Raina, Data and Analytics Tech Lead. So and I'm Phil Callahan, I'm the Data and Analytics Consultant. And so I think that's everyone you might hear from over the next few minutes. So Lisa, let's hear about the data ecosystem whenever you're set.
Okay, great. Thanks, Phil, and welcome everyone. We really appreciate your time in our inaugural summit. So thank you very much for being here. Today, I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. Today, we're going to talk about our view here at CSols of digital transformation with a focus on the data ecosystem. Digital transformation efforts have been predominant over many years now, and they're very far-reaching and have their tentacles in many aspects of the organization, and they really require a push through the organization. It's comprehensive and it's a massive effort of change that can sometimes take between 24 and 36 months. There's definitely faster ones, but depending on the size and complexity of the organization and the effort, some of them are quite long in their timing. And so here at CSols, we sort of looked at it and said, is this really the way that it has to be? Do we have to do these massive monolithic efforts? Or is there a way for folks to get value from their data now and to take advantage of technology now in a phased manner? And so we're not suggesting to abandon transformation approaches, but we are suggesting that we can take a bit more of a phased approach so that you can take advantage of tools that are available to you and to value that you could derive in the short term while also looking at the large scalability within the organization. So for us, it sort of starts with the data ecosystem, what you need to consider in the development of this, what you need to consider in deploying it, how it fits with the overall strategy of your organization, and then what's the bare minimum kind of needed. And so as Phil mentioned, Brent and Vivek are on the call, and Phil will be monitoring the questions, but at the end, we're going to pull them in and have a kind of roundtable discussion where we'll discuss some of the practical aspects of this. And it'll be a Q&A that's some questions that I'm going to feed to them, but also we'll be looking at the chat and the questions to see what you guys have an interest in understanding better. So please, as Phil mentioned, do take a look at that. Okay, and looking at what a data ecosystem is, some of it's pretty typical with transformation, right? An ecosystem is process, technology, people, and it's really a framework at its foundation of technology. From our perspective, it really has to focus on that business need, but it has to take a data-centric flow. A lot of our clients come to us and they ask us to help them select applications and tools that are really more functionality driven, right? We have a laboratory with samples, we need a LIMS. We do experiment work, we need an ELN. And then we need to connect it all at the end when all these teams have worked individually. And we sort of step back, as I mentioned at the beginning, and take a data-centric view. What's the data that's critical for the objectives that you need to meet, regardless of the technology and the tool you apply to it, and what will promote the ease of use and the sort of self-service accessibility to that data in your organization, right? And once we sort of understand that and prioritize that and look at which business groups or which business cases are most critical, then we work to apply the technology and the framework within that ecosystem that allows that data to serve its best value for you and for the organization. right? At the end of the day, there's a lot of data out there, but are we able to use it to help us improve decision-making? And are we really getting the most value of it? Do we even know it's there? So in looking at that, you sort of could ask, well, what's the point of this data ecosystem at all, right? I know I need a lens, I'm just going to go ahead and put it in. And it's really important from our perspective. It promotes a lot of things, and most of them are noted here, right? It promotes usability. It can't use the data, use the systems to create and capture the data. It's not really going to work for you to get any back-end value of it, right? If it doesn't integrate in an automated manner, it's going to be really tough for people to use it. They're going to create sort of parallel pathways for the capture of that data, and you're going to end up trying to figure out a way to transform it or put it in place at the end of the process, right? I'm not going to go through all of these either, but one thing when I put this together, there were two that kind of stood out. Someone asked me how searchability and accessibility aren't the same thing as usability. And they are, except they're slightly different, right? You obviously need to search and access your data as you're using it, as you're creating it and capturing it. But they're somewhat different in that usability is, how do I do my job? How do I capture the data? How do I govern the data around that to be able to use this process? And then searchability and accessibility is slightly separate because the work is done, right? There's another element of that work's been complete, and now I need to search for it. I need to access it. I need to help it, use it to help me make decisions today, but also decisions about where I head moving forward. And so it's almost an after the work is done notion in addition to the usability piece, which is as you're doing the work. And the last one is individualized and shared workflow. If you consider your data as an ecosystem, you sort of widen the view of it. There's a lot of folks that we work with that do experiment-based work, and this is very individualized. Folks use their data, they wrap a ribbon around it, they deliver it to the client, and they're done. They move on to the next set, and they don't really look at that data again to be able to do their day-to-day job. By looking at it as an ecosystem, you sort of consider that individualized need and that local need for that data, right? You don't want micro data ecosystems created just because of how they work or how they view the data. You want them to also see that bigger picture of how this workflow and this data could be shared either within their own group across scientists or across the organization overall. And so looking at it as an ecosystem kind of helps build that wider mindset and promote it in the organization. This is essentially a typical framework within an ecosystem. As the source data approach, you store that data, you transform it, you store it in a larger body, a data mart or a data lake, and then you apply analytics to it. Very typical and standard and where we head. One perspective that we think is important in this phased approach or in looking at a data ecosystem is that the fit for purpose is something that used to be predominant in the approaches to technology. It's sort of coming back in our view as a strong need, right? That fit for purpose framework, even to the level of the data mart or the tools that you use, it's important to make sure that it fits